Hi friends, I'm Bex, coming at you today from kind of an unflattering angle because I can't be arsed to do a proper setup and get all my makeup done nice for filming right now, but I don't owe the world beauty to share my thoughts, so I'm recording anyway. It's been a minute, and while I'm not going to get into all the reasons for that because it's boring and who cares, I will get into some of the reasons for that because I think that they are relevant. I had intentions to continue this channel, and I had, intentions to keep it an eclectic channel and not, become like an autism content creator. But what I found is, following my diagnosis, I needed to do a lot of soul searching, and for me a lot of that was processing through writing and sharing my thoughts. So I kind of became just through that like an autism writer, even though I never intended to be that or market myself that way. Not because I dislike talking or writing about it. In fact, I typically enjoy doing both. It's just that isn't all that I want to do. That being said, I did have the opportunity for a while to write a regular column that in a local paper that was related to autism. I had a regular segment on a podcast that was, well, related to disability, but for me usually ended having some sort of autistic connection. And oftentimes, if I had an idea for a video, I would end up instead putting it towards one of those regular columns or segments that I had, just because frankly they were paid. So if I had an idea, it didn't necessarily behoove me to expend those ideas in a place where, a handful of people were going to see them. And that's not because I necessarily care so much about having an audience. I was just trying to be practical, I suppose. Furthermore, fast forward a bit of time and I lost both that column and that segment within a couple of weeks of one another. The show got shut down and the newspaper came under new ownership, and those were two I say big, they weren't, it's not like it was raking me in like a ton of income, but they were two regular, reliable freelance gigs that I lost. And for a time I considered, trying to place my column elsewhere, or I was like, maybe I could just turn that into video content. And one of the reasons I did not do that was because I got to wondering if the internet needed yet another level 1 white autistic woman, but you know what I'm saying, white autistic woman talking about their experiences. And when I say that, I want to be very clear that I'm not knocking anybody who fits that description, whether they are somebody who creates content online or just in general. Certainly plenty of writers, creators who fit that description have been very helpful to me. I just kind of was wondering, do we need another one taking it? Like, do I need to be taking up this space specifically? And that wasn't a question to which I have found a solid yes or no answer. It's just something I have pondered and kind of wondered if I came back to YouTube in that way, how I wanted to show up. I used to be very much of the mind that, you know, if even one or two people can benefit from what I'm saying or what I'm sharing, then it's worth it. And I don't know that I feel exactly that way anymore. So I had some ideas for videos in general, and without getting into, you know, too much of, you know, why I didn't get around to them or whatever. You know, in terms of the autism content, I was just kind of stuck on what do I really have to say? What do I have to contribute? Is it important? Should I be taking up that space? And all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the things that finally got me to sit down is the need to, even though this isn't fully related to what I wanted to talk about, it is. As I'm filming this, it's April, so it's Autism Acceptance Month. I don't know when I will edit this and get it up on the internet, but it's Autism Acceptance Month, and just the other day, a 17-year-old boy named Victor Perez was taken off life support after he was shot 9 times by law enforcement in southeastern Ohio. Victor Perez was autistic, he had cerebral palsy, and he was Latino. All of these things, the intersections of these identities, I believe, contributed to his death, his murder, really. And I've seen a lot of people pointing out, specifically autistic folks of color, pointing out, you know, if you're a white autistic person with a platform at all, this is something that you ought to be speaking about. So I, around this time last year, I actually wrote a column because an autistic teenager, a Black autistic teenager named Ryan Gaynor, was shot and died from his injuries, again, by police. And it makes me think a lot about what the conversations that are happening on the conversations that are happening on the internet about autism and what gets the most attention and what dies down and all of that kind of stuff. And I have long felt that we, and when I say we, I mean the lower support needs, white autistic people of the internet, the traps we fall into. And a lot of the time I think that we are talking about the wrong things and focusing on the wrong things. Maybe wrong is not the correct word here. I'm so afraid of being misunderstood and mischaracterized. I just ask that please, if you're gonna, it's fine if you don't agree with the things that I'm saying, or if you take issue with some of the things I'm saying, just, you know, before you get angry, maybe ask me if what you think I'm saying is actually what I am saying, because I feel like one thing I find between autistic people on the internet is there is a tendency to pounce on each other and assume the worst rather than having a conversation. I have seen autistic people getting pushed off of their platforms for having nuanced opinions about applied behavioral analysis, for saying that parents of autistic children should be part of the community, or any number of things. Anything that people feel strongly about, somebody comes in and if somebody comes in and has a more nuanced opinion about it, that person gets torn apart a lot of the time, and I think that that's really unfortunate. I think that you can block anybody for any reason. I think you can avoid anybody's content for any reasons. When I was still on Twitter, I blocked somebody for saying Schitt's Creek isn't funny, so I'm not judging. I just think that just because you don't agree with somebody, or your experience doesn't align exactly with that person, doesn't mean that they're wrong, or that they're bad, or that they're trying to take control of the narrative. In some cases, obviously, there are instances of ableism, racism, genuinely really harmful things where, it's not possible to find a middle ground. That being said, there are situations, and I'm speaking very vaguely, forgive me, because I'm trying really hard not to name names here. There are situations in which I think the response is disproportionate to the issue. Like, do we really need to flip the fuck out every time there's like a puzzle piece in a logo somewhere? I don't like the puzzle piece either, but is that really our biggest problem? No, it's not. I'll give you a hint, it isn't. So I just, in cases like that, I feel like sometimes it's easy to get caught up in, oh, well, I'm autistic, I have a strong sense of justice. Yeah, your sense of justice is not always correct. It doesn't always steer you the right way. And I have been on both sides of this. I've made this mistake. I have come out guns blazing about stuff before I tried to understand where the other person was coming from, because when you spent a good chunk of your life assuming the best in people, and then realize that people took advantage of you, then sometimes the pendulum swings too far in the other direction, and you start assuming the worst in people, and that everyone's out to get you, and everybody thinks you're stupid, and that's not productive either. It's not good. So I think if we could try to meet each other where we are, we will be doing a lot better than we are currently doing. I don't need an outline for this video, they said. I will just be able to be articulate and fine and succinctly say what I want to say. I should know better than that. Yeah, what I'm trying to say is there is such a big disconnect, and it's part of the reason I left TikTok. There was also a lack of nuance in fighting in the queer community that I found really unwelcoming and uncomfortable on TikTok as well. So I am no longer active on TikTok, and I could no longer relate to the majority of the content that was being pushed out by many prominent autistic creators. Part of the reasoning for this, for me, I think, is that there's like kind of been an influx of, this is gonna sound so terrible when I say it, but there's been an influx of, you know, the whole concept, or there was an influx of the whole concept of like autistic joy and dopamine dressing and all, and that content is not bad, it's not wrong. I just didn't get a whole lot out of it because a lot of the time that's not my experience. I kind of lost a lot of pieces of my identity to burnout and then the pandemic, and I'm still kind of building up like what my personal style is and what joy is for me. I think there was a period of time where autistic people felt the need to perform their pain, especially lower support needs autistic people, because so often, you know, we were invalidated or told we were faking, or, you know, we didn't have that much trouble. So I think there was a pressure to share and to some degree perform our pain. And I don't say that, when I say perform, I don't mean that it is or was fake. I mean, we had to present our pain in a way that was both digestible enough and disturbing enough to an holistic audience so that they would listen. And now I feel like kind of the same again, pendulum is swinging far in the other direction, where people are performing their joy and saying autism isn't all misery, it's beautiful, it's you know, I'm cute and fun and smart, and I think it's beautiful that people are able to see themselves as all of those things. That's not my experience. And I think because of that, now if you talk about the difficulties of being an autistic person, you're accused of like being negative or what have you, because that's not, you know, we're not there anymore. That's not what we want to talk about anymore. So I don't know, it's very hard. It feels like I don't know, I resent that we have to perform in a certain way. I resent that every time I open my mouth to talk about autism, I have to add a million caveats, because I don't know if somebody, autistic or not, is going to, you know, take a snippet of it for one of their call out videos and decide to mischaracterize what is being said, because you know, they didn't stop to even try to understand. And meanwhile, kids like Victor Perez are being killed. Kids are getting abused. You know, RFK is spewing whatever nonsense he's spewing, and I just I wish that things were different, and I wish that we could all kind of, you know, start trying to work towards the same goals, even if they don't benefit us personally. Can they benefit somebody who has different needs than we do, has different life experience than we do, has different struggles. I'm not even saying bigger struggles, though, of course, but just has different struggles than we do. Can we find a few basic things to agree on that are more important, more pressing, I should say, than the puzzle piece logo, person first versus identity first language, Asperger's, Aspie, neurospicy. I don't want to talk about that stuff anymore. I'm so done. I'm sitting here because I don't really have answers to this. I would simply like to start a conversation of what is the future of online autism advocacy, because I don't know. It's very scary, right? Even like here on YouTube, they I think removed certain protections for I'm not sure if it was homophobia, transphobia, they removed certain protections for LGBTQ creators. Like, I don't know where to go. I don't know where we post. But beyond that, I think that there's an overall issue with the way we show up, or more to the point, the way we don't show up for one another. And there are times when call-outs and call-ins are necessary. When that is the entirety, or feels like it's the entirety of someone's content, I do wonder what their motivation is. Especially when the call-outs are about things like puzzle pieces and little bits of language, like when everybody was coming at that person who made that, everyone's a little bit neurospicy song. And I'm not gonna defend that person or that song. The point, though, is that really the best place to expend our energy? And you tell me, maybe like, clearly there are people out there who thought it was. I'm going to, in the description of this video, link a few autistic creators who I have really appreciated, in part because their experience is very different from my own. One of them is Auti Anthology on Instagram, and she talks about her experience as a Chinese Canadian, and talks about autism and neurodivergence and how that is spoken about or not spoken about in China and in the Chinese diaspora. And also Tiffany Hammond, who goes by Fidgets and Fries on many platforms. She has a great Substack. She's active on Instagram. I recommend checking both of those creators out. Of course, there are many people still advocating and still creating. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom and say, oh, there's no, nobody's talking about these things. That in fact there are plenty of people who are. I just think in some cases the more prominent creators have their attention on the wrong things. Again, not all, just too many, in my opinion. The last thing I want to say is I don't think every autistic person needs to be an activist or an advocate. I think by necessity, we all become self-advocates, or, in the case of caregivers, you become an advocate for your child or your dependent. But you don't have to, if all you have the spoons to do is like advocate for yourself, that is okay. Just don't then position yourself as an advocate for the autistic community when you're not. I'll be back at some point, I think, maybe to actually talk about some of the other stuff, projects I have on the go. Whether I am like fully coming back to YouTube or how often, I still don't know. Nevertheless, I appreciate you stopping by and listening to what I have to say, even though it's not the most succinct and cohesive thing. It's just something that has been on my mind for many weeks, and it had gotten to the point where I felt like I needed to let it out. Yeah, I think that's it. See you next time.